Hello and welcome to our webinar on how to leverage optical character recognition with Infor document processor. I am Reina Silverberg, your host for this session, and with me I have Rohan Somasundaram, the Senior Product Manager for IDP. As always, I'd like to share a few tips about our webinar platform. The screen has several windows or widgets. You can move them around, resize them, or toggle them on and off. You can expand the window to a full screen by clicking the arrows in the top right corner. Some networks may cause you to experience lags in the presentation. Pressing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the browser and will often resolve most issues. You can also leave a comment in the Q&A window. If the F5 doesn't fix your issue, we will come back to you with a potential solution to your problem. We have a lot of webinars in the pipe for next spring. One of the confirmed topics is the API Gateway with Brandon Watson as the presenter. We also have a series of webinars planned based on the TechX presentations, hence the name TechX series. We will post the schedule probably in January next year in our developer newsletter. If you have any topics around Infor OS platform that you'd like us to cover, you can leave your suggestions in the Q&A box. Before I let Rohan loose, I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about challenges. We launched them in TechX and had quite a few people try them during the 2 days. Challenges can be found in developerinfo.com. On the developer portal, we have challenges on the top bar. At the moment, we have 5 challenges: Data Fabric, API Gateway, IDP, AI, and ION. We are working on a few more. For example, Burst is coming up. What you need to do the challenges is have a community account and your own tenant. So we are not providing you with a challenge tenant. You need to actually have the products yourself. So let's go into the IDP challenge, since we are in an IDP webinar. And I'm not going to go through this step by step, just to show you what's included in these. Product, level of the challenge, how long it approximately takes, an overview of it, what you'll learn, and a business scenario to go with it. On the right, we have the requirements, the roles you need to actually complete the challenge. And then, for example, if you have files that you need to download, those are listed here too. And you just click on the box and the download starts. When you're ready to start the challenge, you'll click on Start Challenge. You have the timer on top. And in the first part of the challenge is a tutorial where we build something new according to these step-by-step instructions here. When we get to the bottom of this thing, you see Continue to Challenge, and that takes you to the independent part. So in this case, we have instructions that we need to add a document flow, define a custom document class, add an entity, etc. So things we learned in the previous step in the tutorial, and we can then go through these and create the additional part of the solution. All the challenges end in an export. It can be a result set, it can be a configuration file, an XML file of some sort. So you need to download that, and then you need to upload it. Once you've uploaded the file, in this case we're looking for demo invoice with tax JSON file, you click on Validate Solution. And once you validate the solution, you'll either pass, so you've completed the challenge, or you haven't. If you complete it, you get a badge. If you don't, you can always redo it. You can also go back to the tutorial part if you need more instructions for your independent challenge portion of it. Here you can see the level 1 document processor challenge badge called Document Processor Flow Creator. So everybody who has the badge at the moment is on this page, and it is publicly available. So I am not revealing any secrets. It is quite rare at the moment, so I warmly recommend you to go and get your community account if you don't already have one, and start working on these challenges to get the badges. I'll post the link to the challenge page in the chat right now. From challenges to housekeeping. The session is recorded and available afterwards, either through YouTube or if you have registered for the session, you will get an email with a link to the recording. The session is also pre-recorded, but Rohan is here live, available for your questions throughout the webinar. We'll try to get to all of them, but if we don't, we will answer them afterwards, and we will post all the questions and the answers into the IDP community on Developer Portal so that you will have all of them in one place. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Rohan. Off you go.
Thank you, Rena, for the introduction. So, as Rena mentioned, this is a topic, or webinar rather, all about Infor Document Processor, right? So Infor Document Processor is our cloud OCR, or optical character recognition solution, and we'll touch on that in a bit, what exactly it is, and then we'll go into a demo and show exactly how it works, but wanted to set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. So Infor Document Processor, or IDP. And before I get into the actual topic and presentation, just want to give the statement of confidentiality and disclaimer up front. So mainly for forward-looking items, that those are subject to change in terms of roadmap items or anything forward-looking. So I just wanted to call that out up front. I'm sure you guys have seen that before. Just a quick agenda of what exactly we want to touch on today. So first, I'll give a short introduction of myself. Then we will touch on the industry cloud platform as a whole. So where really Infor Document Processor sits within the larger landscape of the industry cloud platform. And this is important because I want to show how IDP works in conjunction with other products in the platform. So it'll paint a bit of a bigger picture, as well as give you a good overview of our entire suite of solutions and where IDP fits in. Then we'll dive a little bit deeper into what exactly is Infor Document Processor, or IDP. And I'll go through a couple demos to show how it works and how you can set up various flows for your own use cases. And then I'll do some Q&A. So with that, wanted to first introduce myself. Rena already did so in the beginning, but wanted to reiterate. My name is Rohan Somasundaram. I'm a product manager within the Industry Cloud Platform team, otherwise known as Infor OS. And more specifically, I manage Infor Document Processor as well as Infor Document Management. And so my email is listed below. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to set up time to talk or anything at all. I'm happy to help in any way possible. But wanted to set the stage of who I am. Now, before I go into IDP or the cloud platform or any of the topics, I like to have this slide up front because it really encompasses or boils down to what Infor brings to the table in terms of providing value. So, excuse me, the first of those kind of components, or you could think of those as pillars, there's 3 pillars. The first of those is process. So this is all related to our IPCs, or Infor Process Catalog, or Industry Process Catalogs, where we have what a best practice business process looks like. Next is insights. We have a lot of data that we've accumulated and learned and built up over the past number of years as an industry-specific cloud ERP company. So we have expertise in a lot of different industries, as well as going down to the last mile functionality. And we have many customers that leverage our solutions, and we have accumulated data from these customers as well. So we could glean some insights, and that kind of helps drive the process portion of it, or our process catalogs, in terms of what a best practice business process looks like. With the data that we have from our insights, which is housed in our data lake and data warehouse. And then bringing that all together with automation, the third pillar. Automation is all about automating low value repetitive tasks in terms of robotic process automation, or now what's becoming even more prevalent in the market is AI, Gen AI, and now agentic AI, that kind of automation is more intelligent automation and is more flexible and dynamic. But that third pillar is automation. And that automation component is really where IDP resides, Infor Document Processor resides in that third pillar. But all three of these are extremely important in terms of the entire process. So just wanted to set the stage with that. Now, I mentioned this briefly on the previous slide, but Infor is a industry-specific ERP company. So we focus on micro vertical features, a micro vertical data model. We have industry councils, so on and so forth. And so just wanted to highlight that all of that out-of-the-box micro vertical capability also feeds into what we try to do with Infor Document Processor as well. Now, I don't want to dive too deep into the slide, but this is the industry cloud platform overview. Wanted to showcase where IDP fits into the puzzle, so to speak, of this entire cloud platform. So spoiler alert, you can see it right here. It fits in the automation component with a robotic process automation, and then Infor Document Processor is tied to that. But really, starting at the bottom here, so I like to start bottom and then go up. We have our industry-specific ERPs and applications. Those are kind of the core of our business and what our customers use. But they also use and leverage the industry cloud platform through a lot of those industry-specific ERPs applications. So we have components like our APIs, security, data fabric, the process modeler. And then this new component called Velocity Suite houses a lot of our advanced solutions like process mining that I touched on the previous slide, RPA and IDP for our automation technologies, and then AI and ML and Gen AI, which IDP leverages Gen AI and AI as part of its extraction process. And we'll touch on that as well when I get to the IDP specific portion. But just wanted to touch on this as a whole, show where IDP fits into the puzzle. So just wanted to touch very briefly as well on the Velocity Suite. And so this is essentially designed to make process innovation easy and impactful for our customers, where we have three components similar to the previous slides that I showed, where it had the three main pillars of process insights and automation. This is kind of tied to that, where you have diagnose for that process component. So this helps identify inefficiencies in your existing processes. Then you have the automate component, which is using or leveraging our value plus automation solutions that Infor implements for you and are designed to be used kind of out of the box. This is where IDP resides. And then optimize, which is leveraging Gen AI to optimize your processes for maximum productivity. So those three in tandem make up Velocity Suite. And so IDP is a component within Velocity Suite and is designed to help make innovation easy and impactful, so you don't have to do a lot of configuration. It's minimal setup, and then you can leverage these solutions out of the box and have very impactful value. Moving on to the automation component, because that's really where IDP fits in, as I mentioned before. We've developed these use cases out of the box for improving business efficiency so that you can use them right out of the gate. And you can see all these various use cases below. I won't go through each one of them, but as a larger example, invoice processing. Most of our customers that want to use any sort of RPA and IDP technology, invoice processing is probably the biggest use case. Probably 95% of the use cases are around invoice processing. But that doesn't mean that that's the extent of what these solutions can deliver. There's a whole slew of additional use cases that we are trying to deliver out of the box, and invoice processing is just one of them. We also have designed IDP in a way where you can build out your own use cases. So I'll show an example of kind of not an obscure, but a bit of a different use case for Infor Document Processor. But you can leverage what we have built for Infor Document Processor for building out your own use cases for whatever may add value to your business. So with invoice processing, just to give an example, you may receive physical invoices from vendors, or you may receive emails from vendors that go and sit in an email inbox. You need to extract those attachments, the invoices themselves, from the emails, and then send them to Infor Document Processor, right, for extraction. So you want to figure out, okay, first of all, what type of document is it? Okay, I've identified this is an invoice document. Now give me the key value pairs or entities within that document, like invoice number, invoice date, payment amount, so on and so forth. Extract those for me, save that document into IDM alongside the key attributes that I've defined, write a record into the ERP for that invoice so that I have a record, and then I can see the document side by side with that record. So if I need to pull the document and have a look at that, I can do so. Handle all of this, and if there's any exceptions, notify me so I can take action on that. Then send the invoice for approval, and then make the payment once it's approved, right? So this is an entire automation process. It involves RPA and IDP, but you can see how if you were to do this manually, all these steps like downloading the attachment from the email and then uploading that document to IDM and keying in the attributes manually and creating a record in the ERP manually for all those attributes. It's a lot of repetitive duplicate tasks, and it's also very error prone. If you have to key in all this information, it's more error prone than if a system automatically extracts this information and then enters it in for you. So not only does it give time savings, cost savings, but it also has the potential for better accuracy as well. So just to, I wanted to illustrate an example of what value these kinds of technologies bring to the table in terms of uh, uh, actual business value. And you can see here, I mentioned before some of the automation tasks, but we have several automation tasks from RPA, and IDP, which is this OCR component here, is what we will be talking about today. So with that, what exactly is IDP? I've mentioned it a number of times. I've mentioned acronyms like OCR. What exactly is it? So IDP, or Infor Document Processor, is a cloud OCR, or optical character recognition, capability and data extraction platform that helps organizations extract data from business documents in less time and, more importantly, with less manual intervention. So you're able to extract all this content from a document automatically without manual intervention. And so that brings time savings, cost savings, and hopefully more accurate results in terms of getting the key content out of these documents. Now, there are several types of extractions, but as it relates to Infor Document Processor as well as OCR as a whole. And so you have the template-based extraction capabilities that were kind of the way of the past. It's a bit of an antiquated method for extraction, where if you have invoices, for example, that you get from vendors on a weekly basis, just to illustrate an example, you get 500 vendor invoices a week from the same vendors, uh, week after week. You would have to set up 500 templates for each of those vendors to basically extract the key content from those documents with the template-based method. If one of those vendors were to have changed their template even slightly, that would break the OCR capability. You'd have to go and fix that within your template and then continue with extraction. So this is a bit of a manual and antiquated system. It delivers more value once it's set up, but again, it's a bit more finicky because if templates change, then you have to readjust to fix that. Otherwise, it will break the system. It's also initial setup is much more cumbersome than some of the more modern methods. So that's one type of extraction. That is not what IDP does. Just wanted to illustrate that example because we get a lot of questions regarding that. That is not how IDP performs OCR. Some of the other extraction methods are OCR text, so extracting just the raw text from a document and then being able to do some sort of classification on it. Regular expression based methods, key value pairs, and then extracting tables as well. So extracting, a table from an invoice that has all the items that are part of that invoice that were purchased, for example. So these are different types of extraction. We have here document processor flows. This is a bit specific to IDP, but in essence, this allows you to either use a pre-built flow that we have configured as part of Infor to use out of the box. For example, for invoice processing, I mentioned that that's probably one of the largest use cases. We have some pre-built flows leveraging AWS TextRact, which is an OCR capability from AWS, and GenAI, which leverages Anthropic Claude Sonnet as the backend LLM. But we have some pre-built invoice processing flows as well as some other for some other use cases as well as we allow a user to configure their own flow leveraging GenAI for their own use case. So it doesn't have to necessarily be one of the standard use cases. It can be for any use case, right? So this is our concept of document processor flows. When I illustrate that, it will become a little more clear and apparent as to what that means. But wanted to highlight, some of the different types of extractions as well as what document processor flows are in terms of IDP. Diving a bit into the document processor flows, there's a few different types of activities that you can build into these flows. One, you have document classification. Document classification is essentially being able to determine what type of document is coming into the OCR capability. So is it an invoice document? Is it a purchase order document? Is it a bank receipt? Is it, any type of document, whatever the document is, what type of document is it? This is relevant when you have many different documents in the same folder. For example, if you have invoices, purchase orders, and sales orders all within the same folder on your desktop and you want to upload them into IDP, instead of manually having to go and split them out and split them by document type, you can just upload that whole folder into IDP and it should be able to decipher between what type of document is which. Same goes for if you get emails, for example, that are of different types into an email inbox. You don't have to go and separate them out manually. Next, we have entity classification. This is once you've identified what type of document it is, now go and classify the key value pairs or entities within that document. So within the invoice document, for example, go and give me invoice number, the invoice date, the payment amount, so on and so forth. That's what entity classification is. And then we have another activity, which is the ability to upload the document to IDM alongside some of the key attributes that are relevant as part of the document type. So within IDM, we have this concept of document types that allow you to add attributes for easier searchability and identification of what type of document it is, and then the attributes of that document. So if you're looking for a particular invoice, you're able to search based on invoice number, for example, or you want to see all invoices within the document type that are above a certain dollar amount. You can do that as part of the attributes in IDM, and we allow you to upload the document directly to IDM alongside the relevant attributes that you want to extract and save as part of that document directly from the document processor flow. So those are three key activities. Again, you'll see this in the demo when I go through it. Now, before I go into the what's new in the platform, let's give a quick overview in terms of a demo of IDP. So when you come into IDP, this is the screen that you are graded with. This is an overview screen, and it has several different document processor flows that you can leverage here. You could see some of the pre-built flows, like an Infor signed document classification pre-built flow here, leveraging GenAI. Infor invoice classification pre-built flow, leveraging GenAI. You could see this Infor invoice classification pre-built flow using AWS Textract. So you could see different pre-built flows, as I'd mentioned previously, that you can use out of the box. And you have other flows that you can configure yourself within the document processor flow and then use it for whatever use case is relevant to you. So we'll touch on, you could see this Path Lab example. I'll touch on that after the initial demo of invoices to give you an idea of what that looks like. But for now, let's go into this document processor flow and see those same document processor flows that you saw in the overview screen. This is where you build them out. So you can see the name here of the document processor flow. So if I expand this a bit, you can see those pre-built flows that I touched on. Some of the custom built flows are here below. Some are in active status, some are in draft status. This simply means that, okay, these are ready to be used. These are still in draft and are being edited, so on and so forth. But let's go in and create our own document processor flow for invoice classification, just to illustrate the example of how you may build this out, right? So you have the pre-built flows that I touched on, but for the sake of illustration and giving you an example, let's build one out. So let's call this invoice classification flow and click next. And hopefully that's a unique name. Perfect. So going to the next panel here, this is where you add in your document classes. So if this was more than an invoice classification flow, say it classifies invoices and purchase orders, this is where you would add in your different document classes. So I can have an invoice classification flow here. And for the sake of demonstration, let's save this. And you can have a purchase order classification flow here. And let's save that. So you can see here, okay, now this will classify invoices and purchase orders. But for the sake of this example, let's delete these and just make this an invoice classification flow. So let's select invoice classification. This is a name that you can create, so you can create whatever name you want, but I'll leave this as invoice classification. And this is where you would add in your various entities as part of your invoice. So if I were to go into a particular invoice, let's have a look at this invoice here. You can see here, this is a standard invoice that has invoice number, invoice date, the amount to be paid in euros, various components and information. I have a table here that has some relevant information as it relates to the items that are being invoiced, so on and so forth. This is where I would add in these entities that are relevant to the invoices that I want to extract. Now, when I add in the information, I want to be more descriptive and add more information than most invoices. So what I mean by that is if I have more information or more entities here, if it's in the invoice, it'll extract it. But if it's not, then it will ignore it. So if I want to capture more fields, then I would add more entities. So to give an example of that, let's add invoice number, for example. This would be, let's have it as a text field, or let's have it as a number field actually. And this is where I would write a prompt. This is leveraging GenAI as the backend. And so it passes this prompt to a large language model and then is able to extract the information based on the prompt that I pass. So we can say the unique number that identifies the invoice. For example. So this will help identify the invoice number. If this was written as invoice hashtag, for example, this should still be able to identify that invoice number regardless of how it's written in the invoice. If I wanted to add invoice date, for example, let's make this a date field. The date that the invoice was sent in, and what is the format? Day, month, year. In day. So we can put that here. And we can continue to add in all the relevant entities that are part of this invoice. Now, for the sake of time and demonstration purposes, I'm going to leverage one of our pre-built and pre-trained models. So let's use the invoice classification base model using GenAI. So this essentially populated all the relevant entities that was trained or set up in the pre-built model that we deliver out of the box. You can see if I go to invoice number, for example, here it's a text field, and the prompt is a unique identifier of the invoice. Following are examples of key identifiers for the invoice number: invoice NO, invoice hashtag in different format, etc. So the more descriptive you are, the better the results tend to be when you, as it relates to this, are these LLMs. And one thing to note that this is an iterative process. If you don't get the results that you're expecting, you would come back and rewrite some of these prompts to maybe be a bit more descriptive and see how that changes the results. That's how these LLMs work. And as time goes on, they'll get better with time. And they're quite robust now, to be honest. But the initial setup of setting up these entities is far less than the template-based model, and it's more dynamic, where you're able to extract content not based on templates, but based on the content within the document, leveraging LLMs. And so once you set this up, which is rather quick, it should be able to extract documents of various different formats, as long as the information is presented in the document in uh, a recognizable format. So the invoice number is there, the invoice date is there, the total amount is there, so on and so forth. So you could see all the entities that we have set up here as part of this invoice classification model. One thing I did want to note as well is this line item table. So if you go back here, you can see there's a table here that I'd mentioned before with some items, as well as the sales price and the quantities and then the total amount. You could see that here. That is set up as a line item table that you can see, because that is a common component of many invoices. So you can see the components of that line item table that have been set up here. So wanted to highlight that. Let's save this and go to the next panel. So here is where you set up your document class and entity classification as part of your activities. So here you can have document classification. In this case, because this is only for invoices, this would not be necessarily relevant, but we can put it in there so we can classify what type of document it is. And then you have entity classification. So once it determines, okay, this is an invoice, it will extract the components that we defined out in the previous panel. So if we go next, we can see here in the prompt portion, this is the prompt that is going to be passed to the LLM. You can see components like the entities that we defined out. So you can see if we go to the invoice number, because we looked at that prompt that we passed, the invoice number, you could see that the prompt, a unique identifier of the invoice, the following examples are the key identifiers for invoice number, so on and so forth. That is the prompt that we had set up, and this is what's going to be passed to the LLM. So that's pulling right from that document class portion of the setup. We also have some predefined components like instructions that are common across all documents, regardless of what type of document it is. So we've set this up as we see some of the best results from these types of instructions. You can add additional instructions if you want to put your own instructions in for your use case for potentially better results. But for now, we'll leave this as is. So we'll delete that extra instruction that I added. You can do the same for your quality assurance instructions, add more if needed. This is the output format, as well as here's some table information that we have. So the table that we had set up for the item, the line item table with the item code, the description, so on and so forth, that is added here as well with the relevant prompts that we defined. And you could see here, again, the output format for that table as well. So we go to the next panel here. This is just a summary of this document processor flow that we just created. It's an invoice classification document processor flow. You can see here it's leveraging GenAI. It has 27 entities, so on and so forth. So if we save this as active, once you make it active, you can't edit this flow anymore, but I will show you a quick way that you would be able to iterate up on this flow if you wanted to make changes. So let's go ahead and save this as active. And you can see here, this is the invoice classification flow that we just created. And if we wanted to go and test this out, we can go to the overview panel here, invoice classification, and then we can upload an invoice. So let's upload the same invoice that we just looked at. So we can go ahead and upload this invoice and see how it extracts the relevant entities as part of that invoice. So we can see here, this is the invoice that I just fed through. You can see the invoice number, it's 2023, a bunch of zeros, 59, the invoice date, the payment amount, the table, so on and so forth that we saw previously. It has classified this as an invoice. If I go to the entities portion, you can see all the relevant entities that have been captured. So we go to the invoice number, you can see that 2023, a bunch of zeros, 59 number. You could see the invoice date, for example, 2023, 10/27, labeled here. If we go to the next panel, you can see the total amount. This is the amount to be paid, the total amount. And let's see, we had a currency as part. Yeah, so it's identified the currency as euros, as it's labeled here in the invoice, and so on and so forth. So I won't go through all these entities, but let's go into the table. And we can see that it's also captured the table information. So you can see the item code, which is labeled as item number here, but you can see the relevant item codes that have been extracted, what type of item it is, the description of the item, the quantity, as well as the unit price, and then the line total identified here. So it's extracted the table information as well. So if I were to upload a different invoice that is not in this format but has the relevant information, it should be able to identify that relevant information as well into this OCR capability so that I can extract the relevant information. So that is the beauty of leveraging LLMs and not a template-based approach. It's able to dynamically extract this content no matter what the format is in the invoice itself. One thing to add is language support for GenAI as the backend for OCR is much more robust. It's able to identify different languages more robustly, like German, for example. In the German language, now I don't speak German, but from what I've heard and understood, invoice number, where this is written out as invoice NO, it could be invoice hashtag, it could be INV hashtag, it could be any different number of variations. In German, that those types of keys have a lot of different variants, and it's able to identify that quite robustly without you having to define out all those different variations. So just one of the advantages of leveraging LLMs or GenAI as the backend for the OCR capability. Now, that is an example of invoice classification as part of document processor flows, a pretty standard example of of what you might see as part of a use case. One thing I wanted to touch on is if you have a different type of use case. So one use case that we have seen is being able to extract content from a path lab or blood test results, and then furthermore being able to identify, okay, is this number in or out of range without having a human have to look at that. You can do that using document processor. So it doesn't have to be the standard business documents. It can be any type of document as long as you define out the prompts, the entities, and build out the flow for your use case. So I did that as part of an example with a path lab test result. So if I go into this flow here, and you can see here I've defined out a path lab classification with various components of a path lab test results for a blood test. So let me pull that up actually as an example. So here is an example of a path lab for a random dummy test that just for test purposes for showing how it extracts out of this document. So you can see here it's the name, Mr. Dummy. It has an age and gender. It has a report date, a collection date, and then the results here. I've defined all that out as part of this document processor flow. You can see here, this is for path lab classification. You can see the prompt that was passed into the LLM, that will be passed into the LLM, and then the summary here. So let's test this one out and see how it performs. So we can see here, again, this is the document on the left-hand portion, the same document that we had just looked at. You can see it's a path lab classification based on the document class that I had set up in the document processor flow. And if I go to the entities, you can see here, okay, the age of the patient is 20. You've defined out, okay, this is the name, Mr. Dummy. The patient ID has been extracted. The report ID has been extracted. The reported date has been extracted, as well as the time, right? So on and so forth, all this content. And then if I go to the table that was set up, you could see here, this is the relevant results that are in this table here in the actual document. So you can see the hemoglobin, you could see the reference range, you could see the leukocyte count, so on and so forth, all this different content that has been extracted. But furthermore, if I have a document that is not a pre-tested document here that I have in this format, it should be able to extract it even if it's in a different type of format. Maybe the reference range result is not in this exact place, or the report ID is not defined in that document. It should still be able to dynamically extract the content. So if I go to find a document online and see if we can download, let's just take this one. Let's see if I can download this just for the sake of example. Let's save this as, or let's open this up and then save it. Save as. And save this. And run it into our document processor flow. Let's see how it performs in terms of the extraction. So we can see here, this is the document on the left-hand side that we just downloaded. If we go to the entities, we can see here that it's extracted, okay, the age of this patient, 27 years old. This is the name of the patient. The collection date is 17/10/2024. We can see that, let's check the report number. So report ID. So this is the report ID that it's extracted out. We can see the reported time, for example. This is the time that it was reported on. So you can see different components. Let's check the values of the actual test results. So you can see here, in this particular test, you have various values like the hemoglobin that has been extracted out, and then the reference range. You can see the total leukocyte count, all this various content within the actual results. And here, this has less information than the other path lab test result that we had done in the first iteration. And so it's extracted what is relevant to this document. So this is just an illustration to highlight, it doesn't have to be in a particular format. It can be in any type of format, but as long as that the entities are defined out in the document processor flow, it is very capable at extracting the content dynamically. So with that, let's switch back over to the presentation. And I just wanted to highlight what's new in the platform for the October 2025 release. So one of the things that we have added into document processor flow is the ability to have multiple documents within a single file and be able to extract them. So oftentimes you may have a single PDF file that contains multiple invoices, or maybe a few invoices and a few purchase orders, or any types of different combinations of documents within a single file. We have now added the capability for IDP to handle all those documents within the single file without having to manually go through and parse them out. IDP will automatically parse through each of those documents inside the file as long as they are part of the document class in the document processor flow. And so this saves a lot of time. If you have a document with 50 different invoices within the same file, you don't have to go through and manually split them out. So that's one thing that we've added that's a nice feature. And then we've also added Infor document processor model versions. So this is essentially the ability to version up on a document processor flow so that you can make changes as necessary. And so let me show you this one. This is a quite a nice feature because I touched on this before. Say you created a document processor flow. It's not giving you the results that you're expecting. And so it's an iterative process. You need to adjust some of the prompts. So I can go into the document processor flow that I want to adjust. Say it's the invoice classification flow that we just built out. I can create a new version here, and I can leverage the base version as the version that I created. Or if you have two here, if you have version 1 and version 2, you can choose which base version to use. Go next, and then you can go ahead and adjust whatever components of the document class entities that you want to go and adjust. So you want to add another entity, or you want to change a prompt, you can do so. You can save that and then hit next, go through all the same steps that you have seen before previously in the demonstration. I can save it as active. So it will mark this new V2 flow as active. As you can see here, this shows all the versions. If it has multiple versions, you can go ahead and select this. And you can see, okay, which version is active, which version is inactive. And you can try it out here and say, I want to go back and make version 1 the active flow. I can go ahead and activate it. And then version 1 will become active and version 2 will become inactive. So this is essentially a nice way to iterate through different flows and adjust as needed to get the best results. And you have some traceability as well. So we didn't want to go and make flows like being able to go into V1 and edit that, because you can break things and you have less traceability. And so we have model versions now implemented as part of document processor flow. So it's a nice feature that we've added for the 2025.10 release as well. Lastly, I just wanted to have the roadmap highlights here for April 2026, October 2026, and then 2027 and beyond. We have different components of document processor flow, like enabling the newest versions of Claude Sonnet, which is the GenAI backend LLM that we're using for extraction using GenAI. We have different things like expansion of file type support. So being able to extract CSV documents or Excel files. further language validation. So being able to test and validate other languages like Japanese, for example, and see how it does and performs as part of Japanese business documents or any type of document. And other different roadmap highlights here. I don't want to go through all of them for the sake of time, but just wanted to present this so you can have a look, and please reach out if you have any questions. But with that, I will conclude the presentation here. Hopefully it was useful and give you an idea of what document processor flows and IDP looks like, and how you can build your own document processor flows for whatever use cases may be relevant to your business, and use the power of automation for less manual intervention, more time savings, and overall value gains. So you can repurpose resources for more business value add tasks.
Thank you so much, Rohan. Very powerful, very helpful capabilities for organizations to automate some of these text extractions. Do you have any other examples of successful use cases?
Yeah. So the biggest example of a successful use case is invoice processing, as I had mentioned. But we have seen use cases like the Path Lab report that I had mentioned, as well as a couple of other use cases that would add a lot of value and save a lot of time, like expense receipts, right? So if you were traveling for business and you have all these various receipts that you've collected and you need to now upload them into your expense management, for example, being able to automate that, just upload the receipt and then it associates that with the appropriate purchase from your credit card. That's another big use case that we have seen. Another one is financial reports or bank statements, for example. So you have bank statements that you want to be able to automate and upload without having to manually and dynamically go through and enter in that content. That is another use case that we have seen. So those are just a few. Really, the possibilities are endless with Gen AI and these LLMs, as I had shown. You can really configure the prompts to however you want, and then you have a use case for whatever use case you want to tackle.
Yeah, I can definitely personally feel the expense one. Having probably hundreds of expense reports, that would be an awesome capability to just upload your receipts, and the program would then basically fill out your expense for you. So
Exactly.
yeah, that sounds awesome. Thanks again, Rohan. Thank you for the audience for the interesting questions you've sent in throughout the session, and we'll see you again after New Year. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Amazing. Thank you.